this is Warhawk Beyond 2040, and welcome to a very special edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal Album Review Series. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the legendary catalogue from one of the greatest, most iconic, and legendary bands in the history of music, the one and only legendary rock band Rush. And this is part 4 of a 5-part special where I'm going to be taking a look at each decade of Rush's albums. And this is a follow up to the last one that I did, where I discussed all of Rush's albums from the 90s. So, for today's edition, which is part 4, I am going to be taking a look at Rush's albums from the 2000s. So the 90s was a very unique time for the band. They were starting to move away from the synth period that dominated most of their albums during the 80s, and they were transitioning back into a more guitar oriented driven band, something that they hadn't been since the mid 70s. And after releasing 3 albums during the 90s, tragedy unfortunately would strike the band as drummer and lyricist Neil Peart would experience 2 deaths in his life, the death of his wife and the death of his daughter. And this would result in Rush going on a 5-year hiatus. And for all intents and purposes, it looked like Rush was pretty much done. There was no indication of whether or not Rush would reunite to record new music, and Alex Lifeson would release a solo album called Victor, and Geddy Lee would release a solo album called My Favorite Headache. So, fast forward to 2001, the announcement was made that Rush would be getting back together to record a brand new album, and this would mark the first time since 1996's Test for Echo that Rush had recorded and released an album featuring new material. So this was highly anticipated. Expectations were really, really high, and the comeback that Rush would make would see the band begin a whole new second run for themselves, as they would go on to become even more bigger, more popular, and more successful than they were in their heyday. Now, 1981, of course, saw Rush become one of the hottest live acts in the world, and by the 2000s, Rush were already a legendary band, but I would say that Rush achieved godlike status and went on to become one of the most successful rock bands of all time. And there are very few bands that could touch or match Rush in the success department. It's only a small handful of bands. When you think of successful rock bands, you think of Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, Metallica, just to name a few. But Rush would definitely be up there with those bands in terms of legendary godlike status. So we're going to start with the first album, which was their comeback album, and this one came out in 2002, and this one is called Vapor Trails. So Vapor Trails marks the first time since 1975's Caress of Steel not to feature any keyboards. So this sees the band go back to their hard rock roots, as we see more of a traditional power trio recording, guitars, bass, and drums. Now, some fans have a very mixed opinion on Vapor Trails. Some fans have said that this was a fantastic album, and some fans have said that although it is a good album, the lack of guitar solos and the production was too loud and fuzzy and overpowering. I'm kind of split between the two. Would I say Vapor Trails is a great album? I would say so. It's got some excellent songs. Do I think the production is a bit of an issue? Yeah, maybe the production is a bit too overpowering, too loud. maybe certain instruments are too drowned out in the mix. But for me, Vapor Trails is an important album in Rush's catalogue. First of all, obviously, it's the first album in over 5 years that Rush have recorded and released an album featuring new material. And also, I look at this album as the band making a statement. I look at this album as their way of saying, we've been gone a long time and we're back bigger, better, and badder than ever. And I will definitely say that is the case on this album. There's some excellent material and it's quite emotional in some of the lyrics, but I think this was a very strong outing for the band, and Rush just pretty much picked up where they left off. You know, they don't miss a single beat. They sound as good as they have ever done. The guitars has a very large presence. You know, I have mentioned that before that some of the earlier albums during the 80s, the guitars were quite low in the mix. We see here that the guitars has a very large presence and plays a huge part in the music. Alex Lifeson is an absolute savage on this album. Some great guitar playing. Geddy Lee is all over this album with lots of dirty popping bass work. And vocally, Geddy Lee has never sounded better than he does here. And Neil Peart, for a guy who hadn't played the drums in over 5 years, he played like he just played yesterday. He just sounded as good, if not better than ever. And he just played like a machine. And I wouldn't expect anything but the absolute best from the professor himself. You know, Neil Peart is, for my money, one of the greatest drummers in the history, not just of rock music, but in the history of music itself. You know, he's just such a monster powerhouse of a player. And the guys have never sounded more tighter and have never sounded better than they do on Vapor Trails. And I think it's a great album and a very strong outing and a great way to mark the return of one of the most legendary bands in the history of music. So let's have a look, shall we? There we go. There is the track listing. And there is the lyrics. There's a shot of the professor himself. And there is some more lyrics too. Cool shot of Geddy Lee there. And we've got some more lyrics here as well. And some more as well. There's Alex Lifeson. And some more lyrics. And all the guys listed and credited. And the production notes. Now, as far as lack of guitar solos, I mean, as I said, the guitars does have a large presence. Yeah, maybe the soloing is minimal. Maybe it's not stretched out as some of the earlier Rush albums, but there's still plenty of grit and balls in the music. And as always, all of the music is written and composed by Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, and lyrics provided, of course, by Neil Peart. And I think it's a fantastic album. And the tracks we got here are One Little Victory, Ceiling Unlimited, Ghost Rider, Peachable Kingdom, The Stars Look Down, How It Is, Vapor Trail, Secret Touch, Earthshine, Sweet Miracle, Nocturne, Freeze, Part 4 of Fear, and Out of the Cradle. Great collection of material, very strong, very deep, very emotional, but very enjoyable. Yeah, the production isn't up to Rush standards, but I still think this is a great album, in my opinion, and some great, strong material from the guys. Standout tracks for me are One Little Victory, which pretty much says it all, really. You know, it's a sweet victory, and it's a hell of a victory. Rush to come back after the long layoff, and to produce an amazing album on this level is a real victory, in my opinion. Ghost Rider, great song, one of my favourites. Vapor Trail is a great song as well. Earthshine is fantastic as well. Nocturne is great, and Freeze is great as well. But I think the whole album itself, I mean, it's one of those albums you got to really listen to it a couple of more times. But I think it's a really good, strong album, and a band making a statement that we're back and better than ever. And I think it's a very strong album. And considering the fact that Rush had been out of action for 5 years, and to come back on top form, that's pretty impressive, in my opinion. And all three guys, they just sound incredible. And when you get three guys of this talent, you know you're going to get something special. And these guys don't disappoint. So there you have it. Rush, Vapor Trails. Fantastic album and a great comeback for one of the greatest bands of all time. Tremendous stuff. So we move on to the next album, which came out in 2004, and this is an EP, Feedback. So Feedback is the only album in Rush's entire catalogue to feature no original compositions whatsoever. Instead, what we have here is cover versions of some of the great bands that Rush looked up to and idolized when they were younger. And we've got cover versions of The Who, The Yardbirds, Buffalo Springfield, Love, Cream, to name a few. And it's pretty much Rush looking back at their past and going more into their hard rock roots. And it's a lot of fun. It's a fun album. It's just Rush having a jam and just playing the music that they enjoyed listening to growing up. And it's a very good EP. It's a very fun EP to listen to. And one of the tracks would actually get used for a WWE pay-per-view in 2004, which was SummerSlam. So it's quite cool that WWE and Rush actually crossed paths at one point. So I like that. I think that's really cool. So no original compositions whatsoever. It's just Rush having a good time, and it really shows, and you can hear it in the music and playing. I think it's a really fun EP. So let's have a look. And there they are. And it's pretty much Neil Peart giving his thoughts about how this EP came together. And pretty much, like I said, it's just some of the songs that inspired the guys to become the musicians that they are now. And it's really good. I think it's a really fun little EP, in my opinion. So we got Summertime Blues, Heart Full of Soul, For What It's Worth, The Seeker, Mr. Soul, Seven and Seven Is, Shapes of Things, and Crossroads. It's a good little fun EP. I often listen to this one quite a lot, and I like it. I think it's a really good little album. It's only got 8 songs, but there's some killer playing from the guys, and Geddy Lee is having the time of his life, as you can hear in his vocals. Alex Lifeson, he's just absolutely rocking it out on the guitars, and Neil Peart, he's just really channeling in the spirit of the legendary Keith Moon from The Who, and it's a great little EP. I like it. I think it's really good. Standout tracks for me are Summertime Blues, The Seeker, Crossroads, and For What It's Worth. But if you want to hear Rush at their most heaviest and hard rocking, I highly recommend you check out Feedback. I think it's a really fun album, and that's the theme I say for this EP, fun. It's just Rush having a blast playing some of the classic rock songs of the 60s and the 70s. I think it's really good. So there you have it. Feedback. Excellent little EP and highly recommended for all rock fans. I think this is a really good album. Brilliant stuff. So we move on to the next album, which came out in 2007. And this for me is one of the best albums of the 2000s catalogue of Rush, and probably one of the band's biggest albums since coming back. And this one is called Snakes and Arrows. Now, Snakes and Arrows, I would say, is a lot more stronger than Vapor Trails, and that's not taking anything away from Vapor Trails. It was still a good album, had some great material, and it was a band making its return and making a statement. But I think with Snakes and Arrows, there's some great material. It's a lot more thicker. It's got much more punch to it, a lot more grit. There's plenty of balls in the music, and the bands just sound really tight on this. And the bands are experimenting more. So there's mellotron, there's more acoustic guitars, there's mandolins, there's all sorts of things going on with this album. And this, for me, is kind of like Rush going back in time to their 70s roots, but taking it in a more modern direction. And this definitely sees the band in more experimental mode, and I think it's really good. And there's more instrumentals on this album. Now, some of the Rush albums always had at least one instrumental. You know, La Villa Strangiato and YYZ come to mind. But on this album, there's more instrumentals, and you really get to see and hear what Rush sound like instrumentally, and they're just off the charts. They really, really are. So let's have a look, shall we? There they are, the Three Musketeers. There is the lyrics, and as always, you know, especially with recent Rush albums, each picture slash artwork conveys what's going on in the track. So it's kind of like a story within a story. So there's like definitely a theme with each track. So there's the lyrics there. There's some more lyrics there. That's a really cool picture there. I like it. And some more lyrics there. Another cool picture. And another great picture there as well. And some lyrics. Some more lyrics there as well. And some more lyrics there. I do love the artwork for this album, I must say. There's some more there. Some more. Almost like William Tell there in that picture, with the apple on his head, blindfolded. And there's some more lyrics there. Awesome, awesome artwork, I must say. I love the photographs they used for this album. Really, really good. There we are. So as always, all of the music is written and composed by Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, and lyrics, of course, provided by Neil Peart. But there is also a solo contribution by Alex Lifeson, and this is a really good album, I would say. So tracks we got here are Far Cry, which has kind of got a little nod to Hemispheres. Armor and Sword is a great track. Working Them Angels is another great track as well. The Larger Bowl, another great song. Spindrift, another great song. The Main Monkey Business, which is one of the first instrumentals, absolutely brilliant. And lots of heavy use of mellotron, you know, so it's cool to see Rush dabbling in mellotron, an instrument made famous by King Crimson and the Moody Blues. So it's really cool to see Rush really going proper old school here. The Way the Wind Blows is a great track. Hope is a gorgeous solo acoustic piece by Alex Lifeson. You know, we've seen Alex Lifeson do this before in the past, but we never actually had it on a recording until now, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Faithless is another great song. Brave Face is another great song. Good News First. Malignant Narcissism, which is another instrumental with some heavy, dirty and jaw-dropping bass work from Geddy Lee, and We Hold On. But I think all of the material is very strong from top to bottom, and there's some great tracks as well. So standout tracks for me are Far Cry, Armour and Sword, Working Them Angels, The Main Monkey Business, Hope, and Malignant Narcissism, and We Hold On. But excellent album from start to finish, and Rush by this point are really at the top of their game, and they're just putting out some excellent music. But I think Snakes and Arrows is for me probably slightly better than Vapor Trails in terms of the production. I think the production on Snakes and Arrows is tremendous, and everybody just sounds amazing. So there you have it. Snakes and Arrows, one of Rush's best albums from the 2000s. Excellent stuff. So we move on to the next album, which came out in 2012, and this would officially mark the band's final studio album. But what an album to go out on! This one is called Clockwork Angels. Now, this sees the band go back to their roots, and this is a concept album, and these guys don't disappoint. And there's an added twist to this album. We actually have a string orchestra appearing on a number of tracks, and Rush with a string orchestra is not something you ever saw much with the band. Obviously, there were some little string moments on Power Windows, but we never really saw Rush record a number of tracks with a string orchestra, and I think it really added another dynamic to Rush's music. And once again, the band showing that they're not afraid to try new things and take risks. And this album doesn't disappoint. And if you look closely at the cover, at the clock hands, you can see what time it is. 21:12. I thought that's a very clever little nod of Rush to do that, and I think it's very subtle. You know, you could probably just not take much notice of it, but if you look closely and see what time it is, very clever, I think. So let's have a look, shall we? So as always, all the music is written and composed by Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, and lyrics, of course, provided by Neil Peart. And let's have a look, shall we? There we are. I have to say the artwork is amazing. So you have to really like listen to the whole album all the way through to fully appreciate it and get a better understanding of what's going on. Ooh, nice, love it. There we are. There's the lyrics as well. It's quite a dark picture there, isn't it? Yeah. Very nice. And the lyrics as well. And more lyrics. And the artwork for each track is really good as well. Awesome. This is quite good. You know, you've got all like the storm going on here. Very, very cool. That's a gorgeous shot there. Nice. And you got these little interludes as well. So that's all like part of the concept album. And there is the track listing as well. So Clockwork Angels is classic Rush, very heavy in a lot of spots, and the bass work on this album from Geddy Lee is excellent. Vocally, he's on top form. Alex Lifeson is a beast on the guitars, and Neil Peart is an absolute machine on the drums. Everybody just sounds amazing. So, tracks you got here are Caravan, BU2B, The the title track Clockwork Angels, The Anarchist, Carney's Halo Effect, Seven Cities of Gold, The Wreckers, Headlong Flight, BU2B2, Wish Them Well, and The Garden. It's a really good, strong album, and really good to see Rush went back to their roots for this final album. And I think it's one of the band's best ever. And I got to see Rush on this tour with the string orchestra, one of the best shows I've ever been to. And as I said at the beginning, I was very blessed to see Rush twice, and both shows were excellent. Because I thought with the string orchestra, Rush were only doing that in the States. So to have them come to London with the string orchestra was a lot of fun, and even got to hear the string orchestra play some of the Rush classics as well. So I thought that was a real nice treat. So standout tracks for me are Caravan, BU2B, Clockwork Angels, The Anarchist, The Wreckers, Headlong Flight, and The Garden. But excellent album, and what a great way for Rush to go out with this final album. Doesn't get any better than that, and I think, with Rush, they pretty much completed a very successful comeback, in my opinion. Some excellent albums they put out in the 2000s, and as I said, Rush achieved, in my opinion, godlike status, and they were just virtually untouchable. And to go out on top, it doesn't get any better than that. You know, and I like the fact that Rush bowed out while they did, rather than just continue. Because you see a lot of bands, they get older and their playing is not up to the level that it should be. But with Rush, they just said, you know what, we're done. This is the way to go out. So what's a way to go out indeed? So there you have it, Clockwork Angels. Excellent album and a great way to close out the 2000s for Rush. Tremendous stuff. And also 2013 would see the release of Vapor Trails Remixed, and it's not really a new album because there's no new material, but I thought this was worth mentioning. Vapor Trails came out in 2002, and this was pretty much a reissue, which came out in 2013. But I personally think that the production on Vapor Trails Remix is much better than the original. Sounds a lot more clearer. You can hear more things going on, a lot more crisper as well. But I just thought this would be worth mentioning as well, because it would be kind of hard to ignore, talking about the 2000s portion of Rush's catalogue without mentioning this album. As I said, it's nothing different to the original. There's no bonus tracks, but I just thought this was worth mentioning because, it is a remix. And for me personally, I think the remix is much better than the original production wise and sounding wise. As I said, it's a really good sounding album. So there you have it. Rush Vapor Trails remix. Much better than the original, in my opinion. So, which Rush album from the 2000s do I think is the best one? Well, obviously there are some that are better than others, but I think overall, I think this was pretty strong for Rush, as they would put out some of their best stuff ever. But if I had to choose which one I think is the best Rush album of this period of the 2000s, I would definitely go with Clockwork Angels. I think this was the band at their creative peak, and I think this was the perfect way to go out, and it doesn't get any better than this. The string arrangements, the production, the playing, everyone is on top form, and the music from start to finish is just classic Rush. And for Rush to actually go back to their roots and produce a concept album doesn't get any better than that. And I just think they really went out with a real bang, in my opinion. I think this was a very strong album. All of the albums here are pretty strong in their own rights, but I think Clockwork Angels was a very special album, in my opinion. I think this was really Rush at an all-time high, and they have never sounded better than they did on Clockwork Angels. I think this was probably the band's best album since they reunited and came back in 2002. So, wow, tremendous stuff. So there you have it. Clockwork Angels, for me, the best Rush album of the 2000s. Excellent. So after the release of Clockwork Angels and a very successful world tour, Rush would no longer record and release any new albums as they would embark on a final world tour dubbed R40, which would see the band celebrate 40 years of playing together as they would play a number of final live shows playing classic material from their long, extensive catalogue. And Neil Peart would retire from drumming and live work later on in 2015, and Alex Lifeson would put out a statement in 2018 officially announcing that Rush would no longer be performing as a band, and this would also lead to the sad passing of drummer and lyricist Neil Peart, who passed away in January 2020 at the age of 67 after a 3 year battle with brain cancer. And Rush, of course, as great as they are in the studio, they are even better live. But that is going to be discussed in the final part of this 5 part Rush special, where I am going to be taking a look at Rush's live recordings. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What's your favourite Rush album from the 2000s? Is it Vapor Trails, Feedback, Snakes and Arrows, Clockwork Angels, or do you prefer Vapor Trails remixed? There's no right or wrong answer. We all have our favourite albums. You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal album review series, where I am going to be taking a look at Rush's live recordings. So make sure you don't miss that. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.